I thought it would be fun to discuss some of the embroidery techniques that you can use on most sewing machines. Certainly straight stitch, absolutely, and simple zigzag. And you can get quite a few different type of effects quite easily. So the first one I wanted to show you is this. I wanted to give some texture in the duck, so I chose to do this, which is basically a 2 millimeter zigzag, and then you sew it, you actually stitch it, free motion, in long lines like this. Once you've put your foundation stitches down like this, and I'll do a separate demonstration of how what I found to be quite successful. This is basically just the same 2 millimeter wide zigzag, but going sideways, back and forth and back and forth. This here is actually a 5 millimeter zigzag going this direction. Very straightforward. This is done straight stitch. You just do back and forth and back and forth. So they all give different kind of looks. This is the 2 millimeter zigzag width. And then all of the black is done at 1 millimeter zigzag. This red is a 5 millimeter zigzag, and done rather in 2 columns and then done across, just so it gives a bit of a depth and effect. And if you do it fully across, you get that look. Basically, those are some simple techniques. So it gives a really, really lovely effect, alternating the different styles. And I will demonstrate some of those now. Thank you, Tiago. Well, I thought it'd be fun to show you how I hoop up the next project. Tiago's decided to help. So as you can see, I've traced it out with water-soluble marker. That's my guide, so I know what colors to use and stuff. So it's linen, and then on the back is iron-on stabilizer. And then what we'll do is we will put paper. So that is the examination table paper. And then we will decide what we're going to start with. So I think, for the purposes of showing you the base stitching, the understitching, stabilizing stitching, we'll start there. So I might pull it down just a tad to make it easier to work in the top bit. So that went in quite smoothly. So we just want to make sure it's reasonably tight. If you over tighten it, it stretches the fabric, which is one reason I put this stabilizer on the back. And then you do that last bit with the paper. It really makes it good and secure. And as you can see, it's properly tight. So let's move over to the machine. Understitching, or the stabilizing stitching. So, what I found works is you really need to contemplate every direction when you're doing this. So, it's not just north, south, east, and west, but it can pull on angles too and distort your fabric if you don't really secure it in all directions. So it might look a little messy, but I found it actually gives a very good result. So we need to just, we'll secure secure those stitches in. Okay, I've still got this set for zigzags, so I'm going to remove the zigzag off. Put it into straight. There, that now secure better. Okay. A little snip of the tails, and then off we go. So, what we'll do is we'll trace around where I want the stitching to go. Now, these machines are fairly notorious for having a little wobble, so you have to put the screw on so that they don't wobble so much. Okay. A little better, a little wobbling, a little bit less. And then, so that's the first area of black. So now we want to get some stripes going. And what you need to do is make sure it just crosses over the previous thread so that that thread will hold it. And go over, and then if it's on the inside, if it's not actually going to the outside of the thread, you're not getting the support you want. You definitely want it supported. So I can do this faster than I'm showing you now, but I'm just giving you an idea of what you do. And one thing, I know this wobble looks kind of terrible, but actually it really helps when you're doing this kind of embroidery work, because that way it's never ever only on the one weft or warp thread. It always is crossing over, which gives you naturally a better strength. If you have to have straight stitches, then you need to use your screw correctly. So I've done that direction. So what we're going to do now is we'll do the first angle. Okay. And go to the end there and up. Oops. Getting some shreddings going on the thread, so we'll pause and fix the thread, I think. So with this kind of embroidery thread, it can get out of sync with itself and do that little bit of shredding. So sometimes it's worth, if you see that starting to happen, you just give it a quick tug, snip it off, and then cut it past the point where the shredding bit happens, and then it'll behave itself again. Oops, pulled out the needle. Doing well here, but it's always like that on camera action. Okay, so make sure that's smooth. A little snip. Okay. Hold the thread so it doesn't come out this time. Anchor it in. Okay, off we go. Up and then angle. Now this is again one of those examples where I said if you need to sometimes hold the fabric a bit taut so it doesn't bounce. Okay. Alright, now I've done half of that angle, but we have an opportunity to do this angle, which will get us over to the other side. And I can go around here, and up and around here. Now we can go, but oops, I missed that one, so we need to cross over. Getting the shreddings going on here, so it might be time to change my needle. So I wasn't having that problem before. Feel too bad. Oop, doing really well here today. Again. Okay, oops. Okay. Off we go. Okay, a little snip. So you can see we're getting a good grid pattern going on here. So I need to oops. Anything like that doesn't really matter because this is all going to be underneath. Okay, so we've got north and south and then 2 crisscrosses. That will very likely be all you really need to do to secure it so that you can embroider successfully, and then you just start doing your embroidery. So basically all of what I would do now is I will trace out all of the areas in black just so I know where I'm stitching and I'll get confused with my colors, and then I will begin the embroidery part. So I have my console. I'm demonstrating this on my console, but I can assure you I am just using a 2mm zigzag and I'm going sideways. It's on the treadle, but as I said, this can apply to pretty much anything as long as you can get the speed control right. And what we're going to do is the machine, what you'll see is it zigzag back and forth. It goes back and forth, and then as it does that, you move it sideways along the same zigzag. So I'm going to try and keep my hands out of this. But what is really I found is quite helpful, I need to roll that up to get it out of the way, just keep leaning on it. What I found is really helpful with this is to sometimes, if the hooping is creating bubbles, if you just put your fingers on either side and pull it a bit, it will keep it from bubbling up and you will get a perfectly flat stitch. And that just keeps it from working perfectly. So I have this hooped, it's on, so this is polyester thread, but I'm doing this on linen, and I've got iron-on stabilizer on the back of it, and then paper in the hoop as well, just to give it an extra bit of foundation support, and it works quite well. And then it's just a matter of going back and forth. This does take quite a lot of time. I'm going at this speed, just for now, but I can assure you, I'll get my hands out of the way, that I can really ramp this up and it will work just fine as well. As long as you can keep your hands in the right place to control the hoop movement, it'll be fine. So I'm on a treadle, but I can really wind it up. If I had an industrial treadle, it would be less work for me, rather than having to get exercise on the treadle. But just to show you, it's possible to get a really good speed. As you can see, the bobbin noise on this machine is quite extreme. You can also hear the gears going. But I could be doing this on pretty much any of my treadleable machines, or indeed ones which don't treadle. It's just zigzag, moving back and forth, free motion. Very, very simple to do. See is it's bubbling up a bit there, so it'll settle down once the stitching goes. Just for variety, I'll go to the other end. It's the same thing, it's all parallel, so it doesn't matter which side you go from. as long as you always go in the same direction, or the direction that you want the stitches to appear. We're getting near the end here. Okay, so what I can do is I'll drop it to straight stitch just to anchor it. And I'll just lock that in place. Perfect. And then snip. So now what I'm going to do is switch over and we'll do the black, which is a 1mm zigzag. Okay, so we're all threaded up for black. And I will start here. A little trimming. I'll start here just because it's the more forgiving part rather than starting on the yellow. Foot is down even though there's no foot, just to make sure that there's tension. Stitch it in with straight initially just to anchor the stitches. It's easier than doing it with a zigzag, but it doesn't really matter. And then make sure you know the angle you want. So let's crease this to 1, lock it in place. Yep, it's locked. Okay. It always takes a bit to. Oop, your fingers in the way. Now, there are two ways I found that you can do this. One, you can do it in the direction you're sewing, like I'm doing here, so that the zigzag fills it in side to side. You can actually, in certain circumstances, if you need, if you can't sort of get at the angle you want, two of the stitches sideways works out the same. I'll show you what I mean in a second. Here and now so I'll show you. So if I wanted to fill this in, I could do it this way as well. Do 2 stitches that way, then go that direction, and then you sort of stack them beside each other and it works out to the same distance. So sometimes that's easier to do. So you do a couple in each place and then move along to the next. It's a little slower, but it works very well because sometimes you can't really move the hoop successfully, so this helps to fill in if you ever need to fill in a wider gap as well. It looks the same, so I'm just going to spin around again, and then just going and filling the gaps. So I'm using a size 14 needle on this machine, 135 by 5 I think. So here, if I didn't want to spin the hoop, I could demonstrate what I mean. You do it sideways that way. And it gives you roughly the same look. I'll just spin this now. might do is zoom in. Oop, okay, didn't do that quite right. That's one thing you have to make sure it definitely picks up, otherwise it gives you that thread nest, which is not very helpful. Now here's a good example where you can pull, because you're really sewing through some heavy fabric. So if you pull the fabric taut, it keeps it from jumping as much. So I'll get rid of this. And then we'll go up. Let's see if we can zoom in a bit more. Okay, that's the best I can get it to zoom in, otherwise it just stays permanently blurry. So we'll just have to live with that. Perfect, so that's done. Now I just need to do much more of this stitching around the gold, What I'll do is I'll just move over here and then show you it's just the same old thing in between the gold. Here's a classic example. You could spin it sideways, or you can actually just stack them like I said before. One thing is you have to watch to make sure you actually are sewing in the gap between the stitches. It's not as obvious when you turn it that direction. And here we've got the extra support